Okay, welcome, Pahrump. I'm Dr. Michael Reiner, your host of the Independent Doctors of Pahrump, and this is a regular Monday night TV show that I try to participate in and help bring you up to date on some of the latest issues that are happening in the world and in medicine and things of that nature. As you know, I've been talking a lot about diet and exercise, and I wanted to try and breach that into a talk about diabetes, but lately with this outbreak of Ebola and how it's been in the news, and of course we had our first case of Ebola that has come to the United States. And I did talk about it on several previous shows prior to this news flash of this person that came to the United States. I've been talking about the virus, and I wanted to continue to talk a little bit about that. It was pretty obvious that this person was a self-preservationist in that respect. People are desperate. People will do desperate things, and this individual did do that. He exposed some healthy individuals to a virus that he was exposed to, and I believe he came to the United States lying about his situation because if you're in Liberia and you get Ebola, chances are you're going to expire. At least that's the 50% rate that they're experiencing. And so it was more or less a death sentence. And I think the U.S., because it was able to use a rare monoclonal antibody to help cure the two physicians and one worker, that the world might have seen that and mistook the fact that we in America could treat and as well as cure Ebola. And that could not be the furthest from the truth. We really do not have the ability to cure Ebola, although I think we can treat it better than the resources in Africa, and I think we're mobilizing those resources. But I think the potential for innocent people being exposed because of self-preservation issues still exist. And I believe there was a new confirmed case in Spain. So that means that we might start to see this break out of this Central Africa location, and that could be a really major issue because of the 3-week incubation period. I'm going to go back to some slides that I brought out last time just to reiterate a little bit about the seriousness of the virus. And if we look at your screen, you'll see that we again do have the potential for a global pandemic killer. And every 100 years there is one. The last one was in the early 1900s with the Spanish flu. And situations are much different in the 1900s than they are with this virus. The flu virus or influenza is an airborne virus and could potentially spread across the world irregardless of travel. Certainly in the early 1900s, there wasn't the travel ability that there is today. And Ebola is a harder virus to get than influenza, but it is much more deadly than influenza is. And we really have to understand that. And the idea that it cannot be airborne in the sense that influenza is probably true, but people that normally would not be coming up with Ebola, as this cameraman, are being exposed to particulate matter in the air. And there have been studies done where monkeys have been exposed to Ebola. The normal ones are in the same room as the sick ones, and eventually the normal ones that were not injected with the Ebola do come down with Ebola. Now, obviously there may be some other issues, such as, monkeys do spit and they do some strange things, so that could be part of the reason they became infected. But it appears that Ebola could very well be, to some extent, airborne in small amounts. Now, this virus particle does have about a 10-hour window of survival once it's outside the body, but granted, the rituals in Africa with burial and taking care of the sick people do predispose it to a large outbreak. The problem with it is the 21-day incubation period, which is the last bullet point of the slide, that incubation period makes it very difficult to spot someone who could potentially have this illness. Now, I know the media has said that you could, you're not infectious until you actually have developed symptoms of disease, but be it known that virus particles are replicating, and there is this window where the virus amplification starts to take place, where you get these few infectious particles and then you start to develop the signs of the disease, and it's hard to know when that occurs in each individual. So there is this narrow window where you could either through sneezing or coughing deposit virus particles somewhere that can remain active to be picked up by somebody else within that small narrow window. And not to mention the fact that, how do you know who's infected and who doesn't? Well, in another slide after the break, we'll be talking a little bit about the symptoms of what somebody looks like if they do develop Ebola. And again, remember, the current death toll is 3,000. It is rising. The last news break I saw was 3,500, and I'm sure that number will go up. And remember, the cases are underreported. I want to talk a little bit about the actual Ebola virus. It is what they call a filovirus, and if you've ever seen pictures of it, it looks like a long, thin hair with a corkscrew appearance on the back. It is a single-stranded RNA, and has proteins that cover that RNA, which are much different than the other proteins that you see on other virus particles. And those protein particles are sticky. That's how it sticks to a cell, and that's how it gets incorporated into the cell. And that has been, as I mentioned last time, it has been one of those things that some of the medications did prevent the Ebola implantation into some cells, and we'll talk about that and after the break. Now, it does come from, it got its name from the Ebola River, which is where they feel like the virus came down out of a specific area in Africa. And the idea behind it is that bats can carry this particular virus in their saliva. They drop their food on the ground. It is usually picked up by the monkeys or other scavengers and eaten. They do then become infected with the virus. And then, according to people, they may eat monkey meat, or monkeys may bite, or other issues that allow for the transmission of the virus into the human race. Now, one of the things that we need to talk about is of that filovirus. At least I'm aware of several different strains. And if we go back to that, the two strains are basically that I'm aware of are the Sudan strain, which I believe is what currently exists out there today. It is the potential of killing 40 to 50% of the people that become infected with it. So that's why we see a death toll of around 40% to 50% in the current outbreak. The Zaire strain is what they call a slate wiper. It wipes the slate clean. It will kill 90% of the people that come in contact with it. And there is a book out there called The Hot Zone, and it talks about this, and this is a lot of the information that I'm able to relate to you. And it talks about the fact that this is, it's wiped out villages. It's basically, and when you get a slate killer or a slate wiper, basically, it's a very rapid outbreak. It destroys the human tissue, and when we come back from the break, I will go into some of those symptoms that the Ebola virus brings about. And not that I want anybody to get infected or that I think you will be infected. I do believe that you need to be aware, especially if you're traveling and things of that nature, maybe how to at least see someone who might be looking like they're sick. But we're getting into cold and flu season, and someone and they say Ebola presents with, flu-like symptoms, but actually presents with a severe headache in most cases, and body aches and myalgias rather than a sneezy, runny nose and cough and things of that nature. And then progresses to incredible abdominal pain, and then a liquefaction of the internal organs. People with Ebola bleed to death for the most part. Yeah, there is diarrhea, there is vomiting, and the vomit and that particular body secretions are teeming with Ebola virus. So that's where I had this gut-wrenching thing about how, if we were prepared to deal with the virus, why it took hazmat several days to clean up that apartment and leaving the emesis supposedly in the parking lot of this. So I'm trying to suggest, and I hate to be the one to say that, but I don't think we really are prepared to deal with an outbreak of Ebola in this country. And you, as the common citizen and as a common person, need to take time to educate yourself on what there is and what you need to do. And I'll go over a little bit after the break. So stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm Dr. Michael Reiner. I'll be right back after this short break.